The sun blazed down like it was burning through the soul. In the middle of that dusty wasteland, Nihoni, an Apache warrior woman standing nearly 6 feet and 7 inches tall, or about 2 meters, moved slowly through the dead land. Sweat traced a path down her strong back, her bronze skin glowing like heated metal. She heard a faint groan lost in the wind. By a cracked stone well, a man lay motionless. A skinny white man, his body covered in blood and red dust, his lips dry and turning purple. His horse had run off. His canteen lay upside down in the sand. Nihoni knelt. Her eyes were cold and deep, like mountain rock. "Water," he whispered, his voice dry and brittle like ash. She did not ask his name. She did not hesitate. She scooped up 3 ladles of cold water and lifted his head with her scarred hands. Every drop that slid down his throat felt like it was giving breath back to the earth. He opened his eyes and met her dark, bottomless gaze. There was no hatred, no fear, only a quiet look, like 2 souls recognizing each other in a place where no laws remained but survival. She stood up and walked away without a word, leaving behind bare footprints in the sand. All that remained was Corbin, lying there with a faint heartbeat. The image of that woman echoing in his mind, tall, powerful, and not of his world. By evening, the sandstorm rolled in, but the well was still full, and that man had been saved by the hands of someone once called an enemy. When Corbin woke up, night had fallen. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and herbs. He was lying on a deer hide, his wounds bandaged with rough cloth and tree resin. Outside, a fire blazed within a ring of stones, an Apache camp hidden deep within the mountain pass. Nihoni sat a few steps away, her back turned to him. Her broad, bare shoulders glowed in the firelight, and her long black hair fell down her back like a dark river. She was sharpening her blade, slow and steady, like someone who had lived her whole life between life and death. Corbin tried to move, but pain shot through his leg, and he collapsed. She did not turn, just spoke in a low, husky voice, deep as wind in a stone cave. "You do not die from the wound. You die from pride." He caught his breath and let out a faint, bitter laugh. "Anyone else would have left me for the vultures." Nihoni looked at him over her shoulder, her deep black eyes unreadable. "I did not save a white man. I saved someone who was thirsty." Her words silenced him. Corbin looked around. A few Apache warriors stood guard, their eyes watchful. In a corner, an old woman stirred a pot of medicine, the bitter smell rising thick into the air. No one spoke. No one smiled. Only the fire crackled among faces carved like sandstone. A warrior stepped forward, whispering something in their native tongue. Nihoni replied, her voice cold and firm. Corbin could not understand the words, but he understood the tone they were arguing about him. Some of them looked at him with pure hatred, like they were just waiting for her nod to end it right there. Finally, Nihoni stood, tall and commanding like a living statue. "He stays until he can walk." One warrior growled in protest. She answered with a single look that made him step back. That night, Corbin barely slept. He heard distant drums, the whinny of horses echoing from the foothills. In those sounds, it hit him this woman had risked her life to save his. Before he drifted off, he saw Nihoni sitting by the tent entrance, her eyes fixed on the moon. The wind stirred her hair, and silver light touched her sun-darkened face and the hard lines of muscle drawn like steel. She looked like the spirit of this land, wild, proud, and alone. Corbin whispered, knowing she could not hear him. "Thank you, woman of the wind." 3 days passed. Corbin's wound had started to heal, but in the eyes of the Apache warriors, he was still a stranger in a forbidden land. They walked past him without a word, casting glances as cold as stone. At night, Nihoni always sat away from the fire, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the flickering lights of the Federal Army camp began to appear, like artificial stars. The wind carried news. 500 soldiers were moving into this valley, bringing with them rifles, cannons, and orders to wipe out any Apache camp found. The elders whispered. Women clutched their children and hid deeper in the caves. Everyone knew. If the army found a white rancher inside the camp, they would not ask questions. Everyone here would die. Nihoni looked at Corbin, who was trying to walk with the help of a rough wooden cane. "Can you move tonight?" He nodded, though his legs still trembled. "If they see me, you will die too." She was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Let's go." That night, There was no moon, only wind and sand. Nahoni carried Corbin through the canyon, her body large and solid, like a mountain buffalo. The cold wind lashed their faces, every breath tasting of blood and dust. Down in the valley, the fires of 500 soldiers stretched out like a red serpent winding through the darkness. When they reached the clearing between two hills, Corbin collapsed, gasping for air. "Leave me." Nahoni clenched her jaw, did not stop. "I am not letting you die here." Hoofbeats echoed in the distance. A patrol was approaching. Nahoni pulled Corbin into a crack between the rocks, her large hand covering his mouth, their breaths blending into one. As the torches passed by, she whispered into his ear, "If you live, keep the well open. Water does not choose sides." Before dawn, they reached the edge of the valley where his ranch stood. She set him down, her eyes calm and unreadable. Corbin tried to reach for her hand, but caught only air. "Your name?" "No need to know," she said, her voice soft like desert wind. "You only need to remember where the water came from." Then Nahoni vanished into the morning mist, her tall figure blending into the red bronze earth. A few hours later, from a hilltop, Corbin saw a plume of smoke rising from where the Apache camp once stood. He understood she had pulled him out of death and walked right back into it. When Corbin opened his eyes, the morning light poured through the old wooden porch. He was lying beside the well where everything had begun. His wound had been bandaged with rough Apache cloth, dry and clean, like it had been cared for by someone's hands. There were no footprints around the well, only a single large handprint in dried blood on the stone by the water's edge, like a signature left by the wind. Corbin looked around. The ranch was still and quiet, only the old horse grazing out in the yard. He tried to stand. Pain surged from his broken leg, sweat breaking across his brow, but deep in his chest was a different feeling, an emptiness, like he had lost something greater than life itself. He whispered her name, but the wind only gave back the sigh of the desert. By noon, the sound of hoofbeats returned. The Federal Army rode in, blue flags fluttering, a cloud of dust rising with them. A gray-bearded captain rode at the front, his eyes cold as steel. "Corbin Hale," he barked. "Did you see an Apache camp around here?" Corbin slowly shook his head. "Only sand and wind. They killed people up in the northern valley. If you know something and hide it, you will hang like a traitor." Corbin said nothing. His eyes drifted to the bloodied handprint on the stone, just for a second, but the captain caught it. "What is that?" "A mark from a wounded cow," Corbin answered. His voice was strangely calm. A dry wind swept through, carrying the smell of iron and burning sunlight. After a long pause, the captain gave a nod and motioned for his men to move out. The hoofbeats faded into the dunes. Only Corbin remained, standing by the well, his eyes holding all the colors of dusk. He bent down and washed his hands in the cold water. A splash rose, catching the glint of a blue and white beaded necklace floating near the bottom of the well. He froze, realizing it was something she had left behind. Corbin reached in, took the string, and placed the beads around his neck. The soft blue glow reflected in his eyes the light of two worlds, one of dry land and gun law, one of flowing water and quiet mercy. As evening fell, he stood by the well, the wind brushing the dust from his hair. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You saved me. From death, and from myself." Far in the distance, where the red cliffs burned under the sunset, a tall figure stood watching. Nahoni did not come closer, she simply raised her hand. In that gesture, there were no words, no promises, only the respect between two souls who once owed each other a single cup of water. "Thank you for being here." If this story brought back memories of dusty afternoons and hoofbeats echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so each day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another tale of the West. A week later, dark clouds gathered in the western sky, warning of a coming storm. But what was about to fall on Corbin Hale's ranch was not rain, it was human suspicion. Rumors swept across the borderlands. The rancher was saved by an Apache. People whispered it in saloons, in churches, and along wagon roads. Some said he was a traitor, that he had sheltered the enemy on his land. Men who once shook his hand now looked at him with guarded eyes. Then one afternoon, a squad of nearly 10 militiamen rode up, flags flying, rifles slung across their shoulders, hoofbeats hitting the dirt like war drums. At the front was Captain Ward's sunburnt face, eyes cold and worn. "Corbin Hale," he shouted. "We hear you're wearing Apache things." Corbin stepped onto the porch, the blue and white beaded necklace hanging from his neck. He did not hide it. "That's right. You know what that means? It means someone out there still believes people can be decent." A dry laugh rose from the ranks. One soldier lifted his rifle. "His protecting Apache devils." Ward raised a hand, stopping him. "If you truly have nothing to hide, take it off." Corbin looked down at the necklace, glinting in the late sunlight blue like deep water, white like old bone. He slowly shook his head. "I will not. Because I will not forget who saved my life." For a moment, the wind seemed to stop. Ward stepped closer, locking eyes with him, the look of one man recognizing in another that some things are bigger than laws. After a long pause, Ward lowered his weapon. "You're a damn fool, but an honest one." He turned his horse, gave the order to pull back. The militia faded into the dust, leaving Corbin alone on the bare earth. Then the sky opened. For the first time in 3 years of drought, rain fell into the well like a song. Corbin lifted his face. Letting the drops wash over him, they felt just like the water she had once given him. Cold, clear, and full of life. From the far ridge, a lone figure stood motionless in the rain. Nahoni. She raised her hand high, palm facing him, the Apache sign of gratitude and farewell. He responded by placing a hand over his heart, touching the bead necklace. Through the thunder and rain, two worlds, one man, one woman looked at each other in silence, and that small string of beads became the last line between war. That night, the moon rose slowly over the Red Mesa ridgeline, its silver light spilling into the valley below. There were no more hoofbeats. Only the sound of water dripping from the well's edge, the lone sound proving this place was still alive. Corbin sat on the wooden porch, holding a cold cup of coffee, watching the wind drift in, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant smoke. He was no longer afraid of the dark, only full of longing for the deep black eyes of the tall woman who had vanished into the wind, as if she had never existed. Then, suddenly, a flame flickered by the fence. A tall figure stepped out of the night, wrapped in a fur blanket, her frame strong and solid like red bronze. Nahoni. She stopped a few paces from the porch. Her eyes caught the moonlight, calm and deep as still water. Corbin shot to his feet, unsure if he was dreaming. "You're alive." Nahoni nodded, without a smile. She opened her hand, revealing a new necklace strung with silver thread and turquoise stones. "Yours fell into the well. I made another." He took it, his voice rough with emotion. "Why come back, after everything?" "Because I owed a promise." She pointed toward the distant ridgeline, where dozens of small fires burned signs of Apache families who had survived. "You said you would not take the beads off. That promise saved them. The soldiers left. No one died. Now they send thanks." Corbin fell silent. In the wind, he could see the old scars on her arms, the way moonlight danced on her sun-darkened skin, each muscle traced like it had been carved in stone. She was not just the one who had saved his life, she was the symbol of a resilience he had never understood. He bowed his head and slipped the new necklace around his neck. "If white folks ask what it means, I will say, it's the thread between two bloodlines that will never mix." Nahoni looked at him, her voice low. "Not a thread of blood, a thread of water." She turned and walked back into the darkness. Before vanishing, she paused and said quietly, "As long as the well stays open, I will protect this land." Corbin stood there for a long time. Night fell like a heavy blanket scented with smoke. In the well, moonlight shimmered on the water, and the silver beads on his chest glowed like a vow from a man once saved by a warrior. 3 weeks later, the dry season returned. The wind carried the scorched smell of burnt grass and metal. Corbin stood in the yard, looking toward the hills where once he had seen the campfires of the Apache. Now there was only faint smoke. He knew peace on this land never lasted long. One evening, as the sun sank blood-red behind the horizon, he heard hoofbeats pounding in. A new group of militiamen, not Ward's men, but a self-proclaimed gang of patriots. Bloodthirsty men hungry to avenge the white man's pride. The leader wore buckskin, thick beard, eyes red like ash. "Heard you're still wearing savage beads, Corbin Hale. I wear what reminds me I was once saved." The man sneered and dropped a lit match into a pile of dry straw. "Let's see if your Apache guardian can save you from fire." The flames exploded. In seconds, the fence, the grain shed, even the small house were engulfed. Corbin grabbed a water bucket, but the wind turned fierce, whipping the fire onto the roof. He shouted, trying to save the horses, but no man could stand against that kind of destruction. Then the sound of hooves from the east, steady, heavy, thunderous. Nahoni appeared, riding a black horse as massive as a living boulder. She leapt into the fire, her bare shoulders gleaming red, her eyes blazing like the very flames trying to consume her. Behind her, 30 Apache warriors charged in on horseback, spears raised, throwing wet hides and sand to beat back the blaze. The fire broke. Smoke spiraled skyward like fleeing spirits. The militia leader drew his gun and yelled, "You gonna die with that traitor?" Nahoni stepped forward, her voice booming like thunder. "No, I came to save the well. This place belongs to the thirsty, not to hate." No one dared pull a trigger. Wind rose. Red dust swirled between the two sides. And then, from a distant ridge, Ward, the former captain, appeared, shouting, "Lower your weapons. Stand down. No one here is the enemy." The militiamen fled, leaving behind only smoke and ash. Corbin collapsed, coughing hard, his hands blackened with soot. Nahoni helped him up, her large hand warm and steady. He looked at her, breath ragged. "You risked your life just to save a well?" She smiled faintly. "No, I saved something greater, trust." The wind settled. Across the red sky, the smoke twisted upward like a prayer. By the well, the water was still clear, reflecting the shadows of two people, one Apache, one rancher, standing side by side among the ruins that had tried to burn them down. A year had passed since that night of fire. The winds of Red Mesa Valley still blew, but now they carried the scent of fresh grass and clean water. On the scorched ground where everything had once burned, a new wooden house had been rebuilt, sturdier, simpler. In the middle of the yard, the old well still stood, its mouth dark and deep, the stone rim scorched gray, but the water within, clear as glass. Corbin Hale, now bearded and strong, stood by the well drawing water. He had placed a rough wooden sign beside it, carved in both English and Apache. "Water for the thirsty. No color. No war." Whenever travelers, cavalrymen, or Apache passed through the area, they would stop, take a drink, and move on in silence. The well had become the only border no one wished to cross with blood. One spring afternoon, with sunlight slanting down like honey, Corbin heard familiar hoofbeats. He turned. Nahoni approached on her black horse, her dust-covered cloak billowing in the wind. She dismounted, her gaze still calm and deep as the day they met. "I heard the white folks call this place the Well of Peace." Corbin smiled. "That name belongs to you, not me." Nahoni looked at the well, then knelt gently, placing a new necklace of blue and white beads on the stone rim. "It belongs to the land now, to the water." The two sat beside each other, saying nothing, only listening to the wind and the water. In the distance, Apache children laughed, chasing each other around a herd of white cattle. A world once divided was slowly becoming one born from a single ladle of water, from one act of belief. As the sun set, Nahoni rose. "You staying here?" "Until the well runs dry," Corbin answered. She nodded, touched his chest, where the old necklace still hung. "Then you will live longer than I do." She turned and walked into the red evening light. Corbin watched until her figure vanished. Then he sat by the well once more, lowered the bucket. The sound of water hitting wood echoed softly like a blessing. He drank a ladle slowly, tasting the coolness of earth and memory, then poured the rest into the sand, whispering, "For the next one, if they are thirsty." In the golden sky, the blue and white beads caught the last light of day, shining like a small flame that would never go out. The well remained, the water remained, and the story of the giant Apache and the lonely rancher was still carried by the wind, every time the desert grew thirsty. In this dry land, kindness is the only thing that never runs out. It needs no oath, asks for no reward, only a hand offered at the right moment. Nahoni gave water. Corbin kept the well 2 small acts, enough to calm a desert of hatred. In a world where everyone fears being betrayed, they chose to believe, and that belief saved not just 2 people, but an entire land where a single cup of water became a miracle of compassion. Thank you so much for being here with me. Dear friends of Wild West storytelling, tell us where you're watching from, and hit the number 8 if you loved this story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support what I do. I wish you peace and happiness wherever in the world you are listening to this story.